Hello! Welcome to Healthcare Triage Live. We are now up and running. We were even ready way early today, but these things happen. Anyway, here we go. We're going to start off with some housekeeping issues while we get everything started. First of all, thank you very much, all of you, for your suggestions on how to make the live show better. We have made note of all of them, and we're going to see what we can do to make those things come true in the coming months. So thank you. We did see them. We really appreciate it. Secondly, our Facebook group is ever growing, and we're really excited to see that community flourish so quickly. If you haven't been there yet, check us out, facebook.com/healthcaretriage. It's a great way to like and share all the videos we're doing here and get them out there, especially when you want to send them to friends. It's also where you can download... Oh, the poster's not behind me. The poster for the nutrition recommendations, which is hanging in the office, and it looks awesome, and I really need to figure out how to get that in my office at work as well. So thanks again, facebook.com/healthcaretriage. Finally, thank you all for your support on Patreon. I swear to God, I just got spooked because saw someone down the hall. Sorry. For all your support on Patreon, if you want us to get your name on screen and in the credits for June, this is the last week you can do so. Here's why. It's a monthly donation, and they basically bill you at the beginning of every month. So if you're in at the beginning of the month and you're a patron at that moment, that's when you get the reward for the month. So if you come in right now in May, you'll be billed, I think, on June 1st. And then all the wonderful things and the rewards that'll happen will start right then. This includes, the physical things you might have gotten, your mentions on the show. In fact, we just finished up taping episodes for people who are going to get their name mentioned on Monday's show. That will all start on June 1st. So thank you again for your support on Patreon. We can't express the thanks enough. We're very incredibly grateful. And your continued support will allow us to make the show even better. For instance, today, Healthcare Triage Live is going to go all the way to 12:30. Look at that. It's going to be much longer than usual. Let's go. Question 1. Spork Red Fox. Do you have an audiobook of your books? I can't find it on Amazon or in my library for audio. And I'm laughing because of course, everyone's going to assume that I put you up to this, and I did not. I don't think there are audio books. I certainly didn't record one myself, and I don't remember anyone else ever recording one. Having said that, I know that like Kindle and some other readers have features that'll read you the book. It could be boring and some machine person reading it to you. It certainly won't be me. But I believe that there are ways that you could have the book read to you in some way, but no official audiobook. Wish there was. Sorry. Question 2. Sikara. You've said before that vitamin supplements haven't been shown to have a positive effect, but what about calcium supplements, especially for women? Should we take them? Sikara, we've done lots of episodes, actually, which specifically look even at calcium supplementation, especially when we talk about it in the context of the milk emperor. Here's the thing. If you are calcium or vitamin D deficient, then taking supplements for those issues is definitely helpful. And if your doctor has told you you are calcium deficient or vitamin D deficient, then they will be writing you a prescription for a medication to be filled, and that is what those vitamins are. They are technically like medication. What doesn't work is a normal healthy person with a reasonably good diet taking calcium on top of that. The research just doesn't pan out. There have been great randomized controlled trials that show that calcium supplementation doesn't really lead to improved bone strength, reduced osteoporosis, or even reduced fractures. It just doesn't seem to work. I think the episodes we did on meta-analysis touched on this. Certainly the Milk Emperor touched on this. And even I think we've done Healthcare Triage News where we looked at studies of calcium supplementation. Supplementation in general with vitamins when you're not diagnosed as deficient is just a great way to make expensive urine. That's all you're doing. You're peeing them out. Your body doesn't hold on to it. It doesn't store it. It doesn't know what to do with it. We're not built to store up those vitamins above what we can already do. And a normal, healthy diet, in most of the countries that are watching this video, you're getting plenty of vitamins. You're just not deficient. In fact, most people think about it eating too much. The idea of somehow that we're not getting what we're supposed to just really doesn't generally hold true. So, long answer to tell you that no, vitamin supplementation in healthy people doesn't really do much at all. Next question. Omridor. Are there any good studies that compare the risks of both legal and illegal recreational drugs? For instance, alcohol versus tobacco versus ecstasy versus LSD. So I would say, first of all, again, I encourage you to watch our episode on where I discuss marijuana. We did it on 420, not of this year, but of last year. And in that, I talked about sort of the relative risks of tobacco and alcohol and marijuana, and it's hard to make a case that marijuana is more dangerous. And if you want even more, I wrote a piece in the Upshot at the New York Times a couple months ago, I think, that was about pot versus alcohol, where again I will make the strong case that the risks of marijuana pale in comparison to sort of the risks of alcohol, and the societal damage that alcohol does is way greater than the damage that it appears that marijuana does. So if you're comparing marijuana to cigarettes to alcohol, there's a reasonably strong argument to make that those latter two are much worse than the former. That's not the same for many other recreational drugs. I mean, no one's going to make an argument that heroin or crystal meth is not dangerous. It is. They're dangerous to ecstasy and LSD. Relatively, those not great studies. Plus, there are ways to abuse legal drugs. OxyContin, crystal meth is often made from methamphetamines and stuff that is technically legal. So it's not about legal and illegal. It's about proper use versus improper use. Improper use is often very, very risky. Again, everything, even marijuana, has a risk. It's just that we sort of play at the idea that marijuana is riskless and harmless, or we laugh it off as a youthful indiscretion kind of thing, when alcohol is incredibly dangerous. And so in that respect, good episode, good data, that maybe we're overblowing marijuana and not thinking about alcohol strongly enough. But all of these things, if not used properly, have risks. Aaron Zull, you should release the live show as a podcast. Well, I would listen to all your stuff in audio format, but I feel that the live shows are particularly a good candidate. You're prescient because we will be doing... I'm hitting the table, aren't I? Got to stop doing that. You are prescient because we will be releasing the live show in a podcast. In fact, that was our $500 flex goal on Patreon, and you guys cracked that nut in like 48 hours. So starting next live show and all the live shows starting in June, it's going to be... Now, as I'm saying this, I'm wondering if that's true because Mark's going to be on vacation that first week. Well, yes, it's going to be true.
It's very easy.
It's going to be true. Starting next live show, it will be a podcast. And as long as we continue to, have your support on Patreon, this is the kind of thing that your support pays for. So the next live show will. Podcast coming soon. C. Mousers asks, what are good factors to consider when choosing a family doctor? So, okay, this is a hard question to answer. Depends on we're looking at question a lot from so respond you want. My family doctor, who I like, I really like her, and she's been my family doctor for like a decade, or my doctor for a decade. She's all business. She's in, she's out, she asks questions, we get stuff done, we get out. There's no hand-holding. There's not a lot of talking about my personal life or anything else. I like that. I want all business. I'm not looking for, necessarily someone who wants to chat and discuss the weather and everything else. Other people want someone who's going to become like an intimate part of their lives, someone who gets to know them and really understand them as a person. And, if that's the case, then my doctor would be terrible for you. But I think my doctor's great for me. You probably want someone who fits you. If you want a hand holder, if you want someone who's going to be involved, that's what you should look for. If you want someone who's going to be, quick visits and no big issues, that's what you should look for. If you want someone who's going to spend an hour and a half in the room with you, that's what you should look for. Of course, you want to look for quality too, but that's hard to measure. The best way to do that, talk to your friends, get recommendations, talk to other doctors you might know who you trust, who will hopefully try to steer you in the right direction. This question comes from M. Could you please, and I'm assuming it's not the James Bond M, but M. Could you please talk about Crohn's disease? What nutrition changes should those suffering from it make in particular? Would a plant-based diet be ideal or not necessary? Is avoiding milk good? So Crohn's disease is one of the two major types of inflammatory bowel disease. The other type is ulcerative colitis. So I have ulcerative colitis. My brother has Crohn's disease. We have a very unlucky GI family. So they affect you sort of most, you're sort of the effects from them personally are sort of the same way. Sometimes you have to watch your diet. You got to take medication, sometimes immunosuppressive. You have to sort of watch it when you get sick. You certainly want to watch that you're not bleeding or anything else. But the nutrition changes are different for different people. I can pretty much eat anything. My brother, on the other hand, really avoiding anything with dairy is a great idea. So there aren't hard and fast rules. You may have to make changes to your diet depending upon what causes you to flare. A flare is, I should get back and discuss what these diseases are. So they are problems that some people have where their gut sort of attacks itself, or their immune system is attacking their intestines. It can cause sores and bleeding and inflammation, and over a long period of time, they sometimes carry increased risks for cancer because all that inflammation is not good for you. And so people are often on immunosuppressive drugs to try to keep that inflammation down. It can be very difficult to control in some people, and some people have it easier to control. Stress can make things worse. Certain foods can make things worse. Getting sick can make things worse. And so you want to watch out for all of those things. And so you have to find out what diet works for you. As I said before, like I can eat almost anything. I love spicy, super spicy food. Alcohol doesn't seem to bother me. Diet doesn't seem to make much of a difference. But stress does. Like stress really does. And when I get sick, I tend to flare. I tend to be more likely to flare as well. So there's no simple answer here. Some people might find a plant-based diet to be better. Some people would not. Some people cannot tolerate any milk. I don't know why you're drinking the milk anyway, but that's just me. The milk emperor's got you in his clutches. But do you have to avoid all dairy? That depends on you. So there you go. Now I'm reading a reminder to wash my hands on the table, and I will. Next question. Heath Morrison. Can you discuss euthanasia in states, countries that allow it? Is there any research to suggest the slippery slope worries about the law being abused or warranted? Any downsides? So euthanasia is sort of prescribed and allowed suicide. And in some states in the United States and in some countries in the world, I imagine that it's legal in the sense that if you have, a disease for which there is no hope, it is legal to sort of you hear the drugs, yes. It's legal to get drugs or get assistance in sort of ending your life on your terms. The concern of many people is that this is as this person said, slippery slope to it being legal and easier all over, that anybody that wants to commit suicide just can. And you don't want people who are committing suicide for mental health reasons or because they're not well, but who could be helped to do so when they're not sort of fully in their faculty or fully in control of their thoughts and making those decisions. So that's the concern. Having said that, I don't think there's a lot of evidence that in the states that have legalized it that it has gone on to be abused or anything else, because it's not still used that often. There still are usually rules about when it can be used. Like you usually have to have the prognosis has to be you'll die in a certain amount of time. And so it's not widely used even in the states that allow it, but it is used. What are the downsides? The downsides are just what you said, is that people might use it when they really shouldn't, or be making decisions that perhaps aren't in their best interest. But I don't think that there's a lot of evidence. Of course, there's not a lot of evidence of it working either, because there aren't as many places as many would like where this is still legal. It's a very, very difficult issue. There are no easy answers there. Grant McNaughton is from New Zealand, and the HPV vaccine is free for girls but not for boys. Do you think it'd be a worthwhile investment for the government to pay for boys as well? Yeah, absolutely. It was first for girls because everybody was worried about HPV and cervical cancer, and that's why the thrust was on girls. But it turns out that mouth cancer, throat cancer, anal cancer, a lot of these can be caused by the virus as well, and therefore it's now recommended in the United States that HPV be given to boys as well, because of course preventing herpes infection, HPV infection, and then preventing all kinds of cancer is a great idea. And there's a lot of evidence that the rising growth of those other cancers I mentioned can be linked to HPV. So probably yes, it would be a worthwhile investment, but it takes time for a lot of these things to happen. We have a great episode on the HPV vaccine. It's one of my favorites. It was one of our first ones back in the old studio. So I encourage you to go watch that as well. A liquid cow writes, following on from the whole 8 glasses of water thing, a lot of people seem to believe that tea, coffee, soda don't count because caffeine's a diuretic. Can you comment on this? That's bunk. Oh, I just tapped the table. Sorry. Anyway, tea, soda, caffeine, they are all water. The water molecules are in there. They're all part of hydration. They absolutely all count. And so even the nutrition recommendations where everybody got the wrong 8 glasses of water from, they say you get a lot of hydration from water, tea, caffeine, even beer. Caffeine. Caffeine is a diuretic in the sense that it make your kidneys, excrete a little more water than they otherwise would, but your body's incredibly good at compensating for that. So soon after the caffeine sort of kicks up, you're peeing, the rest of the body will then start to slow it down to compensate. So it's not as if you drink caffeine, you're going to dehydrate yourself. That does not happen. Overall, you're still taking in tons of water when you drink a caffeinated beverage, and you're still hydrating yourself. Your body will compensate for the caffeine. Studies just don't hold that up to be true. Next question. Martin Cianciala, can you tell us something about nootropics? They seem to be used more and more. What are the risks of, let's say, paracetam? Does it work? Any studies? I'm going to Google nootropics. Smart drugs, given drugs, cognitive enhancing drugs, all the rage in Silicon Valley these days. Oh, oh my God, I'm going to guess that these are supplements, in which case my answer is easy. No, don't do it. You have to remember that supplements are totally unregulated. We just had a Healthcare Triage news like a couple weeks ago. These are supplements, right?
It's like I roll without the buzz.
But is it like a supplement? But is it like a prescribed drug?
I think so.
Oh, if it's a prescribed drug, then everything I was about to say was wrong. Having said that, I don't know. I don't know enough about this to say. Let's just leave it at that. But I would say that, I tend to be a minimalist in general, and I treat only things when there are real problems. And this sounds like it's less of a problem than people trying to get a benefit. And if you're getting a benefit, then maybe you don't need to be on the drug. If it's a supplement, on the other hand, all of this goes out the window. Supplements are unregulated. And there was that Healthcare Triage news we just did just a couple weeks ago, where New York did a study of 4 major supplement sellers in their state, and found that in an incredible amount of the bottles, there was not one molecule of what they said was in the bottle. It turned out to be ground up houseplants and asparagus. Why anyone believes that they're getting the supplements that they're buying is beyond me. It's not regulated. And they're trying to crack down on that, but it's not there. And there's no studies on this stuff. And they can have harms. They keep trying to pull different supplements off the shelves because it turns out they hurt you. So no, I would not recommend it. Mark the lawyer is, of course, going to remind me that I am not giving you healthcare or healthcare advice. You should only get that from your doctor. None of this should be taken to be me telling you how to treat yourself or to take medications. I'm answering questions. Talk to your own doctor before you do anything medically. V. Coster asks, I have a hard time getting restful sleeps, and I never wake up feeling rested or ready for a day. Scheduled sleep doesn't seem to help. Are there any other sleep disorders other than apnea? I'd still be concerned that sleep apnea is your biggest problem. So here's some things to think about. Are you obese? Do you snore? Do you have, do you fall asleep during the day? First of all, if anyone is is ever asleep with you, do you stop breathing any times while you sleep? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, you may want to talk to your doctor about sleep apnea, because that is more common than people think. And it's snoring is a big signal, and that can be a real problem with restful sleep and not waking feeling rested or ready for a day. My dad, he'll never watch this. My dad has terrible sleep apnea, and for my whole life, we used to just stare at him because he could fall asleep just sitting there and just be asleep in 2 seconds and would snore louder than you could possibly imagine. And I don't think the man was ever rested in his entire life. And then finally they diagnosed him with sleep apnea, and they put the CPAP machine, and it was life-changing. I don't know how he lived before that. So sleep apnea is a real thing. That's what you should think of. Otherwise, talk to your doctor. Some other things can cause you to not have good sleep: stress, smoking, drinking, other drugs. All of those can contribute as well, but you should be talking to your doctor. But I would not rule out apnea just because you don't think it is. Next question. Amalthea Mist. Are there any long-term side effects in taking SSRIs? I have anxiety from a chemical imbalance and may be on them for the rest of my life. There are risks in everything. You just got to own that. Everything has a risk. Everything has a benefit. What are the long-term risks? There are some, but they're minor. But again, I would caution you. You can't just focus on the negative. A running theme on Healthcare Triage all the time is you got to weigh the risks and the benefits. I'm going to assume if you're telling me you have an anxiety, if you have anxiety and the SSRIs are helping, that the benefit you're getting from the SSRIs likely outweighs the potential risks that you might have in the long term. Again, I mentioned a couple minutes ago, I have ulcerative colitis. I take a drug that has an increased risk of giving me like serious like aplastic anemia, like cutting out my red cells and my white cells. And I have to have my blood drawn every 3 months to check that that's not happening. If I only look at the risks, I'd say like, well, why am I doing, I could get aplastic anemia. That's terrible. But the benefits that I get from taking this drug, to me, massively outweigh the potential downsides, which are pretty small. I make that decision consciously. It's rational every day. And if this is the way it is with SSRIs and you, I imagine that is. If it's providing you the way to live a normal or more normal, healthy life, then that benefit likely outweighs the potential small side effects. So discuss that with your doctor. Always weigh that. But, yes, there are probably side effects to SSRIs, but you got to weigh them in context. Next question from Leo DeBroke. Are burnt foods carcinogens? How bad would it be to eat partially burnt toast or burnt marshmallow s'mores? We're going to have no randomized controlled trials here. Nobody is randomizing people to get burnt food versus not burnt food. There are some epidemiologic studies that'll link it. Of course, it matters in the type of food. It matters on the type of burning. And of course, people take that and immediately start saying, like, never grill food. You're going to die of cancer. That's not true. There just doesn't seem to be that big a risk that we can measure it over and over and over again in a good way. Because of that, I would say again, weigh the risks and the benefits. How else are you going to eat a s'more? With a raw marshmallow? I mean, what's the point? Like, of course you have to burn the marshmallow. What else are you going to do? And burnt toast, I mean, if you don't make the toast dark, I don't know why. I don't understand people that eat, like, not darkly toasted bagels or toast. I just don't get it. Anyway, so there we go. So is there a tiny, tiny potential risk? Yes, there's a tiny, tiny potential risk from so many things. Number one killer of children is cars. Do we not put kids in cars? Of course we put kids in cars because the potential benefits outweigh the potential risks. I would not be freaked out about grilling food, burning toast, or eating burnt s'mores. Of course, don't make that the only staple of your diet. That could be a problem. Next question. Nope, I skipped one. Charlie Tuba. Nice, I see what you did there. The U.S. is one of 2 countries that allows direct-to-consumer drug advertising. What's your opinion of this? I'm not the biggest fan. I think that direct-to-consumer advertising with respect to drugs, I think that the potential harms far outweighs the benefits. Most of the drugs that are advertised, this is what I would think. Most of the drugs that are advertised are drugs that are on the edge of whether you need them or not. Like, there are no commercials for chemo. There are no commercials for steroids. There are no commercials for albuterol. There are no commercials. All those drugs I mentioned clearly work, and people take them when they need them. There are no commercials. We make commercials about things that are more on the gray zone. Like, do you really need this or not need this? And when it's pushing drugs that are sort of Me Too drugs or drugs where it's like they're competing with another class of drugs for which something is always good. And when it gets into those areas, then it's like, well, I don't know how necessary this is. It's like how much do people really need to know about it? There's a lot of evidence that shows that it often winds up increasing the number of drugs that are prescribed, not always in ways that are necessary and often ways that are wasteful. So, no, I'm not the biggest fan. I know people will disagree with me. I know I'm giving you an opinion, but you did ask for it. Next question. Is that Leo DeBroke again? You are on it. I had terrible motion sickness as a child all the time. What is motion sickness, and why do children have it more than adults? So motion sickness is just, your balance comes from, bones in your ear. And motion sickness is often when the vibrations or the way the bones are don't always line up with, what you're experiencing, and it can cause the nervous system to overfire or fire in ways that makes you nauseous. Some drugs can help with that. Some drugs don't help with that. Some people just outgrow it. Some people experience it. I get motion sickness if I read in the car. I used to get it way more when I was a kid. I get it less now. I get it if I sometimes have to sit all the way in the back. And some other people don't. Why do people outgrow it? Well, often because, as kids, lots of things are just more difficult. And as we get older, we outgrow them. Allergies, febrile seizures, number of those things. And so a lot of people do outgrow it. But it's one of those things where you just got to be aware of it and take precautions to make sure it doesn't bother you too much. Benedict Blackledge, is there any evidence of pharmaceutical pollutants in water sources having harmful effects? What do you mean by pharmaceutical pollutants? Do you mean like pollutants in the making of drugs?
I bet when they pee out and it goes into the water supply.
Wow. Okay, so Stan believes that they're talking about peeing out the drugs once you've taken them in the water supply. That's probably in pretty small amounts. I think more of a concern that people have had in general recently is, the antibacterial soaps, and that's a much greater quantity of stuff getting into the water supply. And of course, when they're giving it to like all the animals, that can get into the food and everything else. So harmful effects is debatable, not in the sense, I don't think people are arguing that they're harming us by like causing us problems, but there are people that argue that the overuse of antibiotics and them getting out all is causing resistance. That there might be some arguments there. So this is one of those where I've not seen good evidence that there are harmful effects. We'll keep our eye on it, but I don't see them yet. Eric Lemo asks, food allergies and sensitivities seem to be widely discussed topic these days. Can you explain the difference between the IgE immunoassays and the unvalidated IgG-IgG4 tests? No. I wish I could like give you the full blown. That gets into how the immune system works, and you'll find. I mean, if you really get into the mechanics of how the immune system works, there are initial molecules that are made in response to touching antigens, and then those are the early responders, then later sort of late responders, and the late responders are the ones that give you the long-term immunity. And when you want to pick up on allergies, you want to sometimes pick up on those late responders versus the early responders. But without me reading this before I give you the answer, I'm going to screw up some of the mechanics of it, and I don't want to do that. So we could put this on a list, and I could look into it, and maybe it'd be worth a Healthcare Triage episode or news one day. I'm looking over at the table. No one's making eye contact with me. But I don't think that I can give you an answer right there. The next question just says, is kind of crazy specifics. I don't know what that is. We'll go to the next question. Oh, okay. Oh, got it. That question was very specific. Shino033, what is your opinion regarding the IBM Watson? Do you think it's going to be a big game changer for medical pressure as some make it out to be? No, I don't. I think big data, everybody thinks big data is going to change everything, and if we can just manage big data, it's going to be awesome. The biggest problems we have in medicine, me personally, I've often said, is like, it's not often getting us to do stuff, it's getting us not to do stuff. Choosing wisely is a big problem. Like, you have to believe somehow that what's wrong with medicine is that we're not able to make connections or understand the data. That's rarely the case, it feels like. It's often that like the data just can't be accessed, and Watson won't help with that. It's because like standards don't work, and we can't even type it in and get the information we need. It's also that the data, it's not as easy to make these decisions as you think. Like, they're not all cut and dry. It's not if A then B, if then C. It just doesn't work that way. Medicine is very soft in many ways, and I don't necessarily see that. However, prove me wrong. Maybe IBM Watson will. Maybe it'll make these changes, but I'm skeptical. I don't think that the problem that we see in medicine is that like we're not analyzing the data correctly. I think the problems are way different and much more complex than that. Next question comes from, oh, come on, dude. See, now you're just messing with me. I've had deep vein thrombosis in the past and was told I'll need a daily injection with blood thinners when I get pregnant. How likely is a new VTE? That's a venous thrombosis. The pills are bad for the fetus. How safe is the shot? You got to talk to your doctor. I can't tell you what to do here. I will say that DVTs are a problem, and they're a problem in pregnancy, and I would not minimize them. So talk to your doctor about what the risks and benefits are to you and what the risks and benefits are to the fetus, and you make an educated decision. But this is not one of those I'd minimize and ignore and be like, don't worry about it. That's a real thing. You need to worry about that. George A. And I'm flying through these, by the way, because we keep getting feedback that I'm not getting to enough questions, so I'm going to fly. George A. Kasimis, are doctors not advocating tonsillectomies compared to 30 to 40 years ago? My parents are convinced that this is true and causes more ADD because kids aren't sleeping as well with swollen tonsils. Wow. Your parents are awesome. That's like high-level conspiracy theory there. All right. You are absolutely correct. Doctors are not recommending tonsillectomies like they did 40 years ago. I'm pretty sure that we did a healthcare triage where we touched on this. It was about evidence-based medicine, and I know I've written an upshot column in the New York Times about it, where truly one of the first uses of evidence-based medicine in Jack Wenberg's group at the Dartmouth Atlas, was proving that tonsillectomies are complete, waste. That they did studies where, like in Vermont, they could find cities where you divide the town like by the county line, and everybody on this side saw one doctor, and everybody on this side saw the other doctor, and the only difference in whether they got a tonsillectomy or not was which doctor they saw. Sickness, it didn't matter. This doctor tonsillectomied everybody. This doctor tonsillectomy nobody. No difference in outcomes, none. And over time, they basically showed that tonsillectomy was entirely dependent on sort of doctor preference, whether or not they wanted to do it. It made no difference, and because of that, we do almost no tonsillectomies anymore. Back 34 years ago, it seemed like every kid got a tonsillectomy. So they stopped doing it because it didn't work. Now, causing ADD? No. Because sleeping as well with swollen tonsils, the vast majority of kids are not sleeping well because of their swollen tonsil. That's just not happening. Plus, ADD is not necessarily caused by poor sleep. ADD is caused by other things. And so I wouldn't necessarily believe that. Plus, the tonsillectomy reduction massively outweighs the increase in the prevalence of ADD. So, this would be another vaccine autism thing where this line doesn't match up with this line. One is not causing the other. So, true and unrelated. Tonsillectomies are much more rare. ADHD is higher than it used to be. Not related. Alec Elder asks, my hormones and behavior professor. God, you've got a hormones and behavior professor. That is a fascinatingly specific class. Well, he or she compared gastric bypass surgery to a lobotomy, specifically that it is a quick fix with unknown harms related to hormone imbalance. Any evidence on the subject? I think that's a stretch to compare gastric bypass surgery to a lobotomy. There's not much evidence at all that the lobotomies are doing a lot of good, and a ton of evidence that they're not very helpful for most people, and that they were being overused and weird. Gastric bypass surgery, while I agree that some of the long-term harms need to be measured, does work. You can see many people in studies and in anecdotes who lose significant amounts of weight after having the gastric bypass surgery. You do have to couple it with behavior change, but the positive outcomes of gastric bypass surgery, I would say, massively outweigh the positive outcomes of lobotomy. And I'd argue that the negative outcomes of lobotomy probably outweigh the positive of gastric bypass surgery. Is it a quick fix? It's not a quick fix. You still have to have behavior change and change your eating habits and do everything else. So I don't think we should minimize, how big a deal gastric bypass surgery is. But I don't think I would start throwing around, comparisons to lobotomy. That's probably, you're going too far even for me. Cooge Moose. You had an episode about the effectiveness of doctors as they work and are overworked. Is there similar data on nurses and emergency responders? Is there a trend of caretakers being overworked? Yeah, certainly. People that are overworked and work long shifts, they show those. The difference is, to be quite honest with you, and I'm not minimizing the hard work of nurses and emergency responders, but you're still usually on some sort of 12-hour maximum shift. The problem with physicians is that as a resident, I used to regularly work 36 hours straight. I mean straight. No sleep, show up at work at 7 a.m., work all day, work all night, work all the next day, get home, pass out of my bed before or after dinner. So 36 hours straight is a massively long period of time that doctors are much more likely to do than nurses or emergency responders. So there just isn't that sort of massive effect, and that's why they changed the regulations, to get things to they got it down to the 80-hour work week or the 60-hour. I don't know. It's still massively crazy. Anyway, there are data on all kinds of professionals making worse decisions the more tired they get. And there probably is a trend of caretakers being overworked. There just still is a spectrum. I mean, there's still a big difference between working a 12-hour shift and a 36-hour shift. Next question comes from, oh my God, Leo DeBroke. Dude, you got to take a break. Does mental health field count, or should we consider the mind and body to be completely different? I'm going to assume you're asking me, is mental health should be considered the same as physical health? Yes. First of all, they're intertwined. Mental health can absolutely have an impact on physical health, and physical health can have an impact on mental health. And it's a problem in this country, especially, that I think we minimize too often, that mental health is as important and as big a deal as physical health. You can't minimize this kind of stuff. And it's great that in recent years, laws have been passed that make insurance, that there's parity, that they have to cover mental health the same way that they cover physical health. That has absolutely helped me. It's helped patients. It's helped friends. And tons of other people, because you need to treat mental health just as much as physical health, and we still make it second class. But it absolutely should count on its own and because of the ways that it interlocks with physical health. Next question comes from GC Silmolder. Can you talk a little bit about fibromyalgia? Good studies, any treatment, myths, etc. Thank you. I can talk about it, but unfortunately I think that this is one of those topics where you're just going to get angry at me no matter what I say. People will be upset that I'm not taking it seriously enough or that I'm giving it more credence than it deserves. Fibromyalgia is a chronic condition that affects some people, mostly women, and it can be a lot of fatigue and a lot of pain unexplained by any other sources. Because of this, some people will say it's not real, that it doesn't exist, that it's all in people's heads. Other people will say you've not suffered from it, you have no idea what you're talking about it, and that it absolutely exists. In children, there's a similar condition called reflex neurovascular dystrophy, which has the initials RND, which other people will immediately translate into the terrible acronym, really not a disease. So this debate goes on in children all the way up to adults. I wish I had good answers from you. The studies, unfortunately, can push in both directions. There are not great proven therapies for this other than sort of very holistic therapies that involve, some mental health coverage, some exercise, some rest, some pain medications, and some other things. They're myths in the sense that, people absolutely do suffer from this and some receive benefit. There are also myths in that people will often use this some doctors will use this as a diagnosis when they can't figure out what else to do. So I could probably do a whole episode on this as well. And we probably should, because it's a reasonably controversial topic against which there probably is some evidence out there, but just not enough to satisfy anybody on either side, because we just don't know. Aldrich von Claveren, that's his name, Aldrich von Claveren said, John Green showed us that microwaves can disinfect non-metallic utensils. Should I use a microwave like towels and dishes? Should I microwave like towels and dishes? You can. In fact, one of the things that people don't often do is they never wash their sponges, which is ridiculous because the sponge is like the filthiest thing in your house. It's often the most infected thing in your kitchen or your bathroom. Everybody worries about the doorknob. The sponges are horrific, and the people keep using them on plates over and over and over and over again. They are filthy. There's bacteria growing on them like crazy. And one of the ways you can actually disinfect them is to pop them in the microwave for like 30 seconds or a minute on hot when they're wet. You can also put them in the dishwasher. That'll also work. And then you should replace them every once in a while too. But microwaving a dishes, why are you microwaving a dish? Put a dish in the dishwasher. Wash the dish. But it's harder to wash sponges and towels. Those you can put in the microwave and you can actually disinfect them. So that's something you can do. Ollie Parker, what is your opinion on the use of psychedelic drugs in therapy like MDMA with PTSD? So we did, I think it was a Healthcare Triage news episode where they used shrooms. Was it to help people quit smoking? I think it was to help people quit smoking. And the results were pretty impressive. Not to mention that the people seem to love the therapy. I'm not saying that sarcastically. Like they actually did report it was like one of the most amazing experiences of their lives. So I have no problem I have no problem with doing research and then doing what works. If there are real problems and drugs can be used correctly to help people with them, that's what drugs are. We use them in their controlled conditions when we believe that the benefits outweigh the harms. That's true of all drugs. It's sometimes just quirks of history or of the fact that they have secondary benefits that people abuse that make them illegal. But OxyContin works. It's just people sometimes abuse it. Pot, it appears, works for many things, but people abuse it. It might appear that shrooms or MDA work, but people abuse it. But I have no problem in studying this stuff and using it in a controlled fashion when it works and the benefits outweigh the harms. Just me, that's fine, says, my husband's doctor recommended CoQ10 for him. What is your opinion on how to find reliable sources for this type of non-herbal supplement? CoQ10 is one of those fish oil things, right? I think, watch me Google. CoQ10 is a supplement. It's an enzyme. Oh, now I'm having to guess because it still doesn't. It's an antioxidant.
Yeah.
Nope. So no good studies have shown that taking these antioxidants work like that. So if it is just a broad antioxidants, we covered this in the organic food episode. We also covered this, I think, in the meta-analysis episode. Antioxidants are substances that work in your body there are things in your body that will harm you by stripping electrons off molecules. And then antioxidants work by protecting you by supplying those extra electrons to the things that want to harm you instead of like having harm to your DNA or something like that. So antioxidants can help, but different antioxidants work in different ways in different parts of the body. The idea that they're all interchangeable isn't just not true. And so studies of individual antioxidants, vitamin E, other things, show that they don't work in the ways that we want them to. And studies of antioxidants overall show that they don't work in the ways that we often assume. It's not like you can just supplement an antioxidant that replaces some problem that your body had. You need a well-balanced diet with lots of other stuff. So, there's not a lot of evidence, if any evidence, that these kinds of supplements work. My opinion on how to find reliable sources. Well, if it's a supplement, I don't even know. Short of like taking it out and taking it to the lab and having it checked, I don't know. Because when they take these supplements off into the lab, as I said before, you find that there's often nothing in them that's supposed to be in them, like not one molecule. So I'm not a big supplement fan, just not. Next question. Little trip to heaven. Can you talk about the hygiene hypothesis, helminthic therapy for autoimmune conditions? This is purposely getting hookworms to treat allergies. We just taped an episode this morning of Mental Floss on parasites, and I'm now having PTSD because you brought it all back for me. Don't ever get a parasite in your body. Just don't. You got to trust me on this. It's a horrific thing. Hookworms are the ones that have the teeth, I think. You don't want this. Because if it's the ones that, you bleed so much that you can wind up causing mental retardation in children. They're just terrible. Don't do it. Plus, it's like, what are your allergies? It's like, minor allergies. I cannot believe that the benefits would outweigh the harms here. Now, hygiene hypothesis, the idea that we are keeping kids away from dirt and exposure to stuff so much that they wind up actually being allergic to it later in life. There's a little bit of evidence for that. Because we've had good studies that show us that not exposing kids to food in utero and as small babies can actually lead to them more likely being allergic over time. And we even talked about that episode on Healthcare Triage News where exposing kids with peanut allergies to peanuts in a controlled way over time, or peanut protein, reduce the allergies over time. So the idea that the hygiene hypothesis is that keeping ourselves in a bubble makes some of these conditions worse. There's some evidence for that. But taking hookworms to treat allergies? Oh, no. I mean, unless someone shows me some seriously conclusive evidence that the benefits outweigh the harms, I'm not going to put my stamp of approval on that. No. Alex is peachy. It seems that many European countries drink more regularly, I'm assuming alcohol, but less bingey than the U.S. My partner and I tend to share one bottle of red wine together a night. Is this healthy? You're bordering on what most people would consider problem levels of drinking if you're having 2 glasses of wine a night. Like 14 alcoholic drinks a week for a male is borderline problem drinking. And of course, I'm assuming you're a man. If you're a woman, you've actually crossed the line for problem drinking. Having said that, there are lots of people that exist in that category. That is the borderline. So I'm not saying stop drinking. There are lots of people in the world that drink more regularly and less bingey, and that's fine. And alcohol is one of those, again, where I think people are individuals. And how much they drink is an individualized thing, and it's how much is it interfering with their life and how much are they dependent on it versus enjoying it. So I don't have a pat answer for you. My son came home from school a couple months ago, and evidently one of his teachers, and I'm not going to specify the one, said, if you drink any alcohol at all, it's like it's going to kill you. And we had to have a little talk about daddy's scotch drinking because a little alcohol is not going to kill you. Scotch is delicious. And I like beer too. And, drinking moderately or once in a while, there's almost no evidence that that's incredibly harmful. And there's some evidence that it's helpful. And again, it's one of those the benefits versus the risk. You could say that about almost any food or drink. You don't want to be dependent on it. You don't want to drink too much of it. You don't, but some is fine. Your, 2 drinks a day is borderline. That's where the doctors have drawn the line. I don't think there's any good evidence for where they picked that number, but if you talk to your doctor about it, depending on your doctor's whether they think alcohol is good or bad, they will either lecture at you or sort of hand wave it away. But there's no question that drinking like that is probably better than binging. Binging is bad. And so if you drink 2 a day as opposed to 14 in a setting once a week, you're probably still better off. And it's also, it's part of your life, and you have to make those decisions. We treat everyone who watches Healthcare Triage like an adult. There are trade-offs. You should talk to your doctor about them, and you should, always think about, what you're doing with all of that. We also, you should remember, there's a great Healthcare Triage news, one of my favorites, where they talked about how much people in the United States drink, and it blew me away because half of Americans drink literally nothing. And then 10% have a drink on New Year's Eve. And what you right there with your 14 glasses a day, you're like borderline 80th, almost 90th percentile. But that last 10% of people drink an insane amount of alcohol, like 70 drinks a week. It's massive. So even at the 14 drinks a day, you are so far from those last 10%, even though you're so much above the other 80% of people in the country. So it's a personal thing. I don't have a good answer. Jack Baker asks, what do you think of the California Senate bill requiring vaccinations for public school? Oh, yeah, we've taped a Healthcare Triage on that, but I don't think it's actually aired yet. So you'll look for it in the coming months. I think we're going a little overboard, if you want my honest opinion, with some of these bills. Not because I think vaccinating kids is bad. Please, if you watch this channel, I love vaccinations. But you got to remember that even in California, I think only 3% of kindergartners actually take exemptions. It's a pretty small number. And still more than 90% of kids showing up are getting the MMR vaccine. And so even in California, where the last outbreak occurred, things are pretty good. I actually think that all of this focus, and now I'm giving you the TLDR version of that episode, which you should still watch, all of that focus may backfire. It's mainstreaming or making it almost okay to believe that it's that people are not getting vaccines. It's so common we need to make laws against it. It's almost mainstreaming it. We should do everything in our power to try to get as many kids vaccinated as possible, but I'm not sure that these bills do more harm than good, and we should consider whether we're focusing on the wrong stuff. Mr. Mace 519 asks, do you think birth control is overprescribed to women for medical reasons and underlying reproductive health problems are suppressed and left untreated? No, I don't. I don't know where your data is for that. I think there are lots of women who want birth control that can't get it. It's hard to imagine it's being overprescribed to women. Show me some data. If you do, then I will buy into that. But I'm not seeing many good data to tell me that that's a widespread problem. Jordan Johnson, are there any medical treatments or technology that get you super excited because they seem like they're from science fiction? What a great question. So, every once in a while I see something which is so amazing it's almost like magic. There was a plastic surgeon in Philadelphia, and this is when I was in medical school, so we're talking the late 90s, and he could take bones and parts of the body and repurpose them in ways that were mind-blowing. He could take a big toe and turn it into a thumb. Or he could take a long bone and fashion a hand. Crazy amazing stuff that was magic. And that was just more like art than it was technology. We've made huge strides in in vitro fertilization and helping women to get pregnant in ways that we could not before that are sort of fascinating. There's technology with MRIs and stuff where they can model the body in ways that are just amazing. Ultrasound is pretty incredible. There are new replacements for joints or for heart valves or things like that are super amazing. The stuff that they can do. We can do surgery now through these tiny little holes. The problem is that a lot of this stuff doesn't get studied as much as we like. One of my mentees does a lot of robotic surgery and neurology, and he's really interested in doing comparative effectiveness research, and we're trying to get grants to do that right now to try to see do these things actually work better? That's what we need to know, because often we build it, we start to use it, but then we're just not sure if it's worth the money. So that's what we need to do. But there's lots of stuff going on, but it's at the margins. The stuff that we need to focus on, and I'm still convinced of this, is the everyday stuff where we're not doing as good enough job as we should. And that would be better. A few more questions, we got to stop. Anga Charula, do you have any opinion about depression among the medical profession? Do you think it will somehow affect the credibility of doctors and nurses that have mental health issues? It's too common. The suicide rates amongst physicians are unfortunately higher than almost any other profession, especially among physicians that have access to drugs like anesthesiologists. And we minimize the depression, we don't talk about it, and that has issues for the doctor's health. And that's a real problem. Doctor suicide is a real problem. I think I'd like to get to this someday in an episode and certainly a column. And so, do I have an opinion about it? I think it's horrible. I think it's more common than people think, and I think we don't treat it well enough. And there's probably some data to support that. Flying beagles, is there solid evidence for flossing daily? How about using mouthwash? That's such a good question. Because we keep getting told to brush our teeth and floss our teeth, and then I hear people tell me, and I haven't looked up the data yet on, whether there are good randomized controlled trials and how much that actually helps. Anecdotally, my wife, I do a good job of brushing. Let me preface this with I brush my teeth and I floss, but my wife is way better at it than I am. And her mouth is full of cavities. I have one filling in my mouth, one, and I got it as an adult. Because I had braces when I was 30, as an adult is when I finally had braces. And when I had the braces is when I got my first cavity. And I'm convinced it was just because, no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get all the braces are nasty. That's why we give them to kids. You don't want them as an adult. And I still only have I have one filling. And I am not the most crazy brusher, flosser in the world. And my wife absolutely is. And there's a lot of research and evidence that's pointing out that how many cavities you get is much more linked to your genetics and it's familial than it is and bacteria than it is to brushing and flossing. Having said that, brushing and flossing will make your breath smell better probably, and that's probably as important as anything else because otherwise people won't like you. Mouthwash, same purpose. So I would say just do it. Why not? What's the harm? Just do it. Brian Herrick, can you give advice on being my own advocate without being a jerk? I had to beg to keep my insulin pump on during a shoulder surgery, even though I had a note from my doctor. I'm getting punchy because it's the end of an hour episode, but I would tell you that I don't know how good of advice I can give you because I'm probably a jerk about it. So you have to be an advocate for yourself. I have to be an advocate for myself. I have to be an advocate for my kids. I have to be an advocate for my patients. Sometimes that makes you come off as being a jerk. Begging to keep on your insulin pump during a shoulder surgery, that obviously was what you needed to do. And if that makes people think you're a jerk, who cares? Benefits and harms, people. If the benefit of you keeping that on massively outweighs the harm of a couple people thinking you're a jerk. Sometimes doing the right thing is important. And it's a mistake to believe that everyone is going to like you all of the time. I had to learn that lesson in residency. Someone taught it to me, and I realized that it's important. Sometimes people need to get angry at somebody else. That's how it is. The President of the United States is arguably the most powerful man on earth, and half the country hates him. There is no magic for being beloved by everybody. It's just not going to happen. So sometimes you must be an advocate for yourself. It's justified and it's important. And that may require some people not being happy with you. So be it. That's just the way things go. Question 37. Ooh, look, there's one more. They slipped one in. Is there any health benefit to eating slower? Is there a health risk if I wolf food down? So there's some evidence, I don't know how good it is, that shows that people who eat slower sometimes eat less because it gives your body sort of a chance to catch up and tell you you've had enough. I've found that to be true, that often if I just sit and wait, I will get full and I won't have to eat as much. Health risk to wolfing food down. Well, if you wolf it so down fast that you choke, that's obviously a health risk. And there's a potential that if you eat more quickly, you might overeat. And that has long-term potential health risks. So why not? Slow down. Enjoy the food. That was actually, I think, one of you in our recommendations, in our nutrition recommendations. Go get the poster. Here's a great way to segue right into our trail stuff. Go get the poster and many other wonderful things at Healthcare Triage. No, at facebook.com/Healthcare Triage. Our Facebook page. It's awesome. You should go. You should check it out. You can get the poster. I keep looking around as if I'm going to show you the poster. Oh, it's right there. Oh, we're doing it right now. Here we go. Yes, you can get the poster. Yes, it's free. It's free. We're not even charging for it. You can go download it, print it off, do whatever you like with it. There are some nutrition recommendations from our very popular episode. And one of them was eat Eat with other people. It makes you eat more slowly often. That's a wonderful thing. So there you go. Facebook.com/Healthcare Triage. Next week's live show link is already in the description, and you can start leaving your questions there now. Leave no more questions in the description or down below of this episode. Don't do it. We won't see it. Next week's episode, live link down below. Start leaving your questions now. We got to like 30 some questions this time. That's awesome. Leave them. Finally, a couple just other caretaking issues. Patreon. I'm punchy. Patreon.com/Healthcare Triage. It's a way for you to help support Healthcare Triage. Healthcare Triage will always be free to watch and share, but your donation can not only get you some pretty cool rewards and some inside scoop on some of the stuff going on the scenes besides Healthcare Triage, or even get your name mentioned in Healthcare Triage episodes or in the credits. You can help make the show better. When we reach certain benchmarks, we're able to improve the set and some of the equipment we use and make doing the live show a little bit easier so we don't start 7 minutes late. We're making podcasts now, and we'll even maybe be able to do things on location or have guests and do lots of other cool things. It would only make the show better. You'll be helping out not only yourself, not only the show, but all the wonderful people who watch Healthcare Triage. Thank you so much for your support. We've been blown away so far. It's patreon.com/Healthcare Triage. Finally, we're going to be going a little bit on vacation in June, not because we want to take a break, but because people have to travel to do other amazing shows and things like that. I should mention that Mark won't be here next week. There won't be graphics, for instance. If that matters to you, you want to enjoy Healthcare Triage Live, but Stan and I are still going to pull this together and try to pull it off. There will still be Healthcare Triage episodes coming out and Healthcare Triage news, although maybe not quite so often. But we're going to try to keep producing as much as possible. Finally, we are still interested in your feedback of anything we can do to improve Healthcare Triage News or Healthcare Triage Live or Healthcare Triage in general. Leave your suggestions in comments, especially better start in next week's right now. You can tweet them at us, at HC Triage, at Aaron E. Carroll, at Olsen Video, at Crash Course Stan. All of those are other ways for us to see if you have suggestions on ways we can improve the show, because we're here for you. We love doing it. Thank you all. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for your support. Catch you next week.